My name is Cordelia Haynes, and I'm sitting across from my boss, Thaddeus Morse, as he slides a single sheet of paper over his gleaming desk toward me. It's my annual review, the 8th one I've had at this marketing consultancy, and I already recognize the expression on his face. It's the look he gets when he thinks he's about to corner someone, the smug satisfaction of a cat convinced the mouse has nowhere left to run. "We're cutting your salary in half," he says casually, leaning back into his leather chair. "Take it or leave it." The number printed on the page barely seems real. It wouldn't even cover my monthly rent. I lift my eyes to his and see that he's actually enjoying this, smirking. 8 years of 60-hour weeks, of shielding his reputation, of being the person clients actually trust while he soaks up the credit. 8 years of loyalty, and this is what he believes my value amounts to. "I understand," I say calmly, surprising even myself. "When does this take effect?" His grin stretches wider at once, like he's savoring my supposed defeat. I nod, fold the paper with deliberate care, and place it in my bag. "Perfect timing," I tell him. Something flashes across his face, because that isn't the reaction he expected. Before I go any further, let me ask you to take a few seconds to tell me in the comments where you're listening from, because I want to know how far this story is reaching around the world. And if you haven't already, like, subscribe, and click the bell icon, because what I'm about to share will show you exactly how someone can believe they hold all the power, only to discover they never had any at all. What Thaddeus didn't know as he sat there trying to humiliate me was that 3 weeks earlier, I'd received a call from Elena Voss. Elena runs the most successful marketing firm in our city, and she'd been quietly observing my work for years. Not Thaddeus's work, mine. In this industry, everyone knows who actually produces results, even when someone else's name is on the door. Over coffee, Elena had looked at me directly and said, "Cordelia, I want to offer you something different. Not just a position, but a partnership. I'm expanding, and I need someone who understands that business is built on relationships, not ego." I hadn't answered her that day. I told her I needed time. But sitting across from Thaddeus, watching him destroy 8 years of dedication with a single piece of paper, Elena's offer suddenly felt like the universe aligning things perfectly. You need to understand who Thaddeus Morse really is. He inherited this firm from his father 12 years ago. He never worked client services, never stayed up all night repairing a relationship after a mistake, never had to convince a furious customer to give the company one more chance. He's the kind of man who believes simply owning the building makes him indispensable. What he never realized is that for the last 3 years, I've been running his entire operation. Officially, I'm a senior account manager. In reality, every meaningful decision passes through me first. Every emergency gets resolved by me before it ever reaches his awareness. Every client relationship exists because I built it carefully, conversation by conversation, trust by trust. Take our largest account, Pettin Industries. Their CEO, Janet Pettin, believes she has a direct line to the owner because that's how I structured things. When something goes wrong, she asks for me by name. When she's pleased, her thank you notes come addressed to me personally. Thaddeus is copied on emails, yes, but Janet and I are the ones who actually work through the issues together. Or look at Morrison Tech, our second largest client. I've been their primary contact for 4 years. I know when the founder's daughter started college. I remember his wife's chemotherapy schedule. I send congratulations when their quarterly results exceed projections. Thaddeus shows up to the annual dinner and exchanges pleasantries, but when Morrison needs real guidance, he calls me. That same pattern exists across our entire client base. 23 major accounts, and every meaningful relationship flows through me. Not because I planned it that way, but because I care. I remember details. I follow up. I deliver what I promise when I promise it. And what made Thaddeus truly vulnerable, though he never saw it coming, was that the vendors and suppliers who keep his company functioning also deal primarily with me. When we need rush printing, I call Jameson at Premier Graphics. When a last-minute catering crisis hits, Rosa at Artisan Foods recognizes my voice instantly. When our systems go down, Marcus from Texture asks for me because he knows I'll explain the problem clearly and treat his technicians with respect. These aren't transactions, they're human connections built over years of professionalism and consistency. While Thaddeus was playing golf and attending shallow networking events, handing out business cards to people who would forget him by the next week, I was building a real foundation. Even the employees gravitated toward me. When someone was confused, they came to my office. When departments clashed, they asked me to step in. When people considered leaving, they confided in me first. Not because I positioned myself as a rival authority, but because I listened and solved problems instead of deflecting them. After my conversation with Elena, I started paying closer attention to how much of the business depended on me personally, and the realization was staggering. I was copied on nearly every important email. My phone number was the one client saved. My relationships were the engine behind repeat business and referrals. Thaddeus had made a classic mistake. He built a company where he was the face, but I was the structure. Remove me, and nothing had anything to stand on. So when he slid that salary cut across his desk with such satisfaction, when he treated me like a disposable expense who should be grateful for scraps, I already knew my next move. Perfect timing, I'd said, and I meant it. I left his office, walked straight to my desk, opened my laptop, and sent a short, professional email to Elena Voss. I accept your partnership offer. When would you like me to start? Her reply arrived within 20 minutes. How about Monday? It was Thursday. That afternoon, I submitted my formal resignation to HR. 2 weeks' notice, exactly as my contract required. Polite, professional, giving him time to transition my duties. What Thaddeus didn't understand was that my responsibilities couldn't actually be transferred. You can't hand over 8 years of trust in a 2-week handover. When I told him I was leaving, he barely looked up. "We'll manage," he said. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I spent my final 2 weeks being impeccably helpful. I documented projects, compiled client histories, wrote detailed vendor guides, and organized my files. What I didn't transfer were the relationships themselves, because trust isn't something you can document. On my last day, I packed my personal items, my diplomas, a few plants, and left everything else behind. I shook hands, hugged a few colleagues, and walked out at exactly 5 o'clock on Friday. Monday morning, I began my new role as Elena's partner at Voss Associates. By midweek, things at Thaddeus's firm were already unraveling. Clients called asking for me, vendors complained about treatment they'd never experienced before. People reached out, confused, wondering what had happened. I listened, offered no explanations, and focused on building my new company the same way I always had, with competence, consistency, and respect. Within weeks, former clients sought us out on their own, frustrated by what they were now experiencing firsthand. By the end of the first month, we had signed 3 major accounts. And when Morrison Tech finally made the switch, their CEO summed it up perfectly. Thaddeus hadn't just lost an employee, he'd lost the person who translated between his ego and the reality of running a business. Without me there to bridge that gap, his clients were finally seeing the truth for themselves. The stories started reaching me through industry contacts, how Thaddeus had forgotten about a major presentation and tried to wing it with outdated information, how he'd promised deliverables his remaining staff couldn't possibly complete because they lacked the client relationships needed to gather requirements, how he'd mishandled a crisis situation that I would have resolved with a few phone calls. Each failure made my former clients more appreciative of the service they were now receiving from Elena and me. Each interaction with Thaddeus reminded them why they'd valued working with his company when I was there making everything run smoothly. 6 weeks after I left, I ran into one of my former colleagues at a coffee shop. She looked exhausted. "Cordelia, it's chaos over there," she said. "Thaddeus keeps asking us to handle things you used to do, but none of us know how. Half the vendors won't return our calls. Clients keep asking where you went, and Thaddeus just keeps saying we need to figure it out because business has to continue." I genuinely felt sorry for her and the other employees dealing with the fallout of Thaddeus's mismanagement. They were good people, trapped in an impossible situation. "Are you looking for other opportunities?" I asked. "Everyone is," she said, "but Thaddeus has started making threats about non-compete clauses and legal action if anyone else leaves." That's when I knew he was truly panicking. Empty legal threats are what incompetent managers resort to when they realize they've lost control of something they never really understood. Elena and I began getting calls from talented people at his company, not because I was recruiting them, but because word had spread about our growing success and positive work environment. When people are stuck in a failing situation, they naturally gravitate toward opportunities that look more stable and rewarding. We hired 3 of Thaddeus's former employees over the next month. All of them had given proper notice, all of them were free of any legitimate contractual obligations, and all of them were eager to work somewhere their skills would be valued instead of taken for granted. With each new hire, we gained deeper institutional understanding of accounts that were struggling at the old company. Not proprietary information or trade secrets, but general industry knowledge and professional expertise built over years of experience. The final domino fell when Peston Industries decided to switch firms. Janet called me personally to explain their reasoning. "Cordelia, we've been trying to make it work with your old company for 2 months now, but it's like working with strangers. Nobody there understands our business or our history. Every conversation starts from zero. We're paying premium rates for amateur service." When Elena and I signed the Peston account, we became the fastest growing marketing firm in the city. In 3 months, we'd gone from a small boutique operation to a major player in the local market, all because Thaddeus Morse thought cutting my salary in half would teach me my place. The last time I saw him was at an industry networking event about 4 months after I'd left his company. He looked awful, stressed, exhausted, defensive. When he spotted me across the room, he actually tried to come over. "Cordelia," he said, "we need to talk." I was polite but firm. "I don't think there's anything for us to discuss, Thaddeus." "You destroyed my business," he said, loud enough that people nearby started paying attention. I looked at him calmly. "I didn't destroy anything, I just stopped fixing everything." That was the moment he finally understood what had really happened. I could see it on his face. For 8 years, he'd been running a company where his most important role was staying out of my way while I made everything work. When he drove me away, he lost the only person who'd been keeping his incompetence from becoming visible to his clients. He didn't lose his business because I sabotaged it. He lost it because he'd never actually been running it. The room around us went quiet. Other professionals in our industry were listening to a conversation that perfectly illustrated why some businesses succeed and others fail. It had nothing to do with revenge or corporate warfare. It had everything to do with understanding that lasting success comes from real competence and authentic relationships, not from titles, ego, and the illusion of power. I excused myself politely and rejoined Elena's conversation with a potential new client. 6 months later, I heard through industry contacts that Thaddeus had been forced to sell what remained of his company to a larger firm. The brand name disappeared completely. His father's legacy, built over decades, was gone. But here's the part people don't always understand about this story. I never set out to destroy Thaddeus Morse or his business. I never planned some elaborate revenge scheme. I simply refused to keep propping up someone who treated me as disposable while relying entirely on my work to protect his reputation. The most devastating revenge isn't what you do to someone, it's what happens when you stop doing everything for them. Today, 2 years later, Elena and I run the most successful marketing consultancy in 3 states. We have 47 employees, offices in 2 cities, and a client waiting list that stretches 6 months out. Forbes featured us in an article about women-owned businesses reshaping their industries. The local business journal named me Entrepreneur of the Year. But that's not the twist I want to share with you. The twist is what happened to Thaddeus after his company collapsed, and how it led to the most unexpected phone call I've ever received. Remember how I mentioned he was forced to sell what remained of his company? What I didn't know at the time was who bought it. It turned out to be acquired by Meridian Holdings, one of those massive corporate investment firms that buy struggling companies, strip them for assets, and either flip them or dissolve them entirely. Thaddeus walked away with enough money to cover his debts and maybe 6 months of living expenses. Not exactly the comfortable retirement he probably imagined when he inherited his father's company. For about a year after that, I didn't hear much about him. Occasionally, someone mentioned seeing him at networking events, trying to rebuild his reputation, but nobody took him seriously anymore.
Word travels fast in our industry, and everyone knew what had really happened to his business. Then, about 8 months ago, something interesting started happening. I began getting calls from headhunters asking if I knew anything about Thaddeus Morse's background and work history. Apparently, he was applying for senior management positions at various companies, and his resume made it sound like he'd been some kind of visionary leader who'd built a successful agency before deciding to pursue new challenges. I was always honest when those recruiters called. I explained that while Thaddeus had owned a company, he hadn't been particularly involved in the day-to-day operations or client relationships. I never badmouthed him personally, but I didn't help him create a false narrative about his professional abilities either. Most of those conversations ended with the recruiter thanking me for my honesty and moving on to other candidates. But then, 3 months ago, I received a call that completely caught me off guard. Ms. Haynes, this is Patricia Williams from Blackstone Associates. We are an executive search firm, and we're hoping you might be able to help us with a rather unusual situation. Blackstone Associates is one of the most prestigious headhunting firms in the country. They place CEOs and senior executives at Fortune 500 companies, and I couldn't imagine why they were calling me. We've been retained by a client to find a chief marketing officer for their organization, Patricia continued. It's a significant role with substantial responsibility and compensation. Based on our research, we believe you might be an ideal fit for this position. I was flattered, but confused. I appreciate the call, but I'm very happy where I am. I'm a partner in my own firm. We understand that and respect your success, but this opportunity is quite extraordinary. Our client is specifically looking for someone with your combination of relationship-building skills and operational expertise. The compensation package starts at $400,000 annually, plus equity and bonuses. That got my attention. Not because I wanted to leave Elena or our company, but because that kind of offer meant they were serious about finding someone exceptional. Can you tell me more about the client? I asked. Actually, that's where this becomes a bit sensitive. The position is with Meridian Holdings, specifically to oversee the marketing operations for their recently acquired properties. They're looking for someone who can rebuild client relationships and restore operational efficiency in companies that have experienced management challenges. I almost dropped the phone. Meridian Holdings, the company that had bought Thaddeus's business? I'm not sure I'd be interested in that particular opportunity, I said carefully. Ms. Haynes, I hope you'll at least consider meeting with our client. They're prepared to offer significant autonomy and resources. And frankly, they specifically requested you by name after researching your background and reputation. That evening, I talked it over with Elena. The whole situation felt surreal. They want you to clean up corporate acquisitions that failed because of poor management, she said. That's actually a fascinating role. You'd be doing what you did for Thaddeus, but for multiple companies with real recognition and proper compensation. But working for the company that bought his business? Doesn't that feel strange? Cordelia, you didn't cause his business to fail. You just stopped preventing it from failing. If Meridian Holdings recognizes that they need someone with your skills to fix similar situations, that's a testament to your expertise. I agreed to take the meeting, mostly out of curiosity. Meridian Holdings' office was in a downtown high-rise with sweeping views of the city. Patricia Williams met me in the lobby and escorted me to the 42nd floor, where I was introduced to David Chen, the regional director overseeing their recent acquisitions. David was nothing like I'd expected, mid-fours, soft-spoken, and incredibly well-informed about business operations. He'd clearly done his homework on my background and the situation with Thaddeus's company. Cordelia, thank you for meeting with us. I want to be completely transparent about why we're interested in you specifically. He pulled out a thick folder and set it on the conference table between us. Over the past 18 months, Meridian has acquired 7 small to mid-sized companies across various industries. All of them were failing when we purchased them, and all of them showed the same pattern of dysfunction. Talented employees being undervalued by ego-driven leadership, strong client relationships being neglected or mishandled, operational expertise being ignored in favor of surface-level leadership. He opened the folder and showed me detailed analyses of each acquisition. In every case, they discovered that the company's real value lived in the relationships and expertise of mid-level employees who weren't being properly supported or compensated. When they tried to rebuild these businesses using traditional management approaches, they struggled to restore the client relationships and operational efficiency that had made them valuable in the first place. I could see exactly where this was heading. You want me to help you identify and retain the people who actually made those companies work. Exactly. But more than that, we want you to develop a systematic approach for rebuilding companies that lost their operational foundation because of poor management. We believe you understand something about business relationships that most executives miss. David leaned forward in his chair. We've studied what happened with your former employer's company, not to judge or assign blame, but to understand the dynamics that led to such a complete operational collapse. What we found was fascinating. He pulled out another document, this one focused specifically on Thaddeus's company. Before you left, that business had consistent revenue growth, high client retention, and strong supplier relationships. Within 6 months of your departure, all of those metrics declined sharply. But here's what really caught our attention. The clients who moved to your new firm reported higher satisfaction and better results than they'd ever experienced before. I wasn't sure where he was going with this. That suggests to us that you weren't just maintaining existing relationships, you were delivering a level of service that exceeded what those clients had received previously, even while constrained by someone else's company structure. What does that have to do with Meridian Holdings? David smiled. We want to give you the resources and authority to do for our acquired companies what you did for your own firm. Identify the real talent, rebuild authentic relationships, and create sustainable operations based on competence rather than hierarchy.
The offer was even more substantial than Patricia had mentioned, $400,000 base salary, plus performance bonuses that could double that amount, plus equity stakes in the companies I successfully rebuilt. I'd have a team of analysts and operational specialists. I'd report directly to David with full autonomy over hiring, firing, and strategic decisions for the marketing operations of all acquired properties. But the most interesting part came next. There's one more thing, Cordelia. We have a particular situation we think might interest you personally. He pulled out a final document. 3 weeks ago, we acquired another struggling marketing firm. The owner had been trying to rebuild his reputation after his previous company failed, but he'd made the same management mistakes. Talented employees leaving, client relationships deteriorating, operational dysfunction. My heart started beating faster. The owner's name is Thaddeus Morris. I stared at David in complete shock. "You bought Thaddeus's new company?" Actually, he never owned it. He was hired as the general manager by a group of investors who believed his past experience running an agency would be valuable. When that arrangement failed, they contacted us about acquiring the assets and rebuilding the operation. David opened the document to show financial reports and operational assessments. The company has good bones, a solid client base, talented staff, decent infrastructure, but it's suffering from the same leadership problems that destroyed his previous business. The staff doesn't trust management. Clients are frustrated with inconsistent service. Nobody seems to understand how to coordinate all the moving parts. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. "You want me to take over the company where Thaddeus works?" "We want you to rebuild it correctly. What happens to Mr. Morris would be entirely your decision as operational director. You'd have complete authority over staffing and management structure." The irony was almost too perfect. The universe was offering me the chance to become Thaddeus's boss, to control his professional future, to decide whether he stayed or went. It was the ultimate revenge fantasy handed to me on a silver platter. And that's when I realized something important about myself. I didn't want it. Not because I wasn't angry about how he treated me, not because I believed he deserved redemption, but because accepting that role would mean spending my time fixing problems created by someone else's incompetence, instead of continuing to build something meaningful with Alina. "David, I'm incredibly flattered by this offer. The compensation is generous, the role is challenging, and I can see how it would be professionally rewarding." I paused to gather my thoughts. "But I've spent 8 years of my career propping up someone else's ego and cleaning up messes I didn't create. I'm not interested in doing that again, even with better pay and recognition." David looked disappointed, but not surprised. "I understand completely. We had to make the offer because you're exactly the kind of leader we need, but we respect your decision to focus on your own company's growth." As I was leaving the building, Patricia walked me to the elevator. "Can I ask you something off the record?" she said. "Sure." "When David told you about the Thaddeus Morris situation, I saw your expression change. Was there some personal history there that made the offer less appealing?" I thought about that question as the elevator descended 42 floors. "Actually, it was the opposite," I told her. "The personal history made me realize that the best revenge isn't getting power over someone who wronged you. It's building something so substantial and meaningful that their opinion of you becomes completely irrelevant." 6 months later, Elena and I opened our third office. We now employ 63 people, including 12 former employees of various companies that Meridian Holdings has acquired and rebuilt. Our client base includes Fortune 500 companies, and we've been approached by 3 different investment firms about expansion opportunities. Last month, I received an invitation to speak at the National Marketing Association's annual conference about sustainable business growth and authentic leadership. The keynote addressed to an audience of 1,500 industry professionals. Thaddeus will probably be in that audience. He still attends industry events, still tries to network his way into new opportunities. If he is there, he'll watch me receive recognition for the expertise he never bothered to acknowledge when he had the chance. But here's what I've learned about real success. It's not about proving anything to people who undervalued you. It's about building something so substantial and meaningful that their recognition becomes irrelevant. The best revenge isn't destroying someone who wronged you. It's becoming so successful that you forget they exist. And when you do remember them, you realize that their ability to hurt you disappeared the moment you stopped needing their approval. That salary cut Thaddeus gave me 2 years ago was supposed to teach me my place. Instead, it taught me my worth.
If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment telling me about a time someone underestimated you and how that experience changed your perspective on your own capabilities. And if you're currently in a situation where you feel undervalued or taken for granted, remember this: the most powerful thing you can do is stop making yourself smaller to accommodate someone else's insecurity. Your worth isn't determined by how other people treat you, it's determined by what you choose to build.